Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and this is our 2 o'clock Westchester coronavirus update for Monday, July 6th. And as we had previously said, this would be the last of our daily updates. We've been doing them most recently Mondays through Thursdays, and we originally intended to end them today. We're going to continue them once a week, every Monday. So every Monday at 2 o'clock, we'll provide an update. We've seen that since there has been a bit of an uptick in the numbers, and the numbers had been decreasing steadily, we thought as we entered phase 4 we would, not need to do this on a regular basis. But we think there's enough out there in the marketplace to try to give you that update. We have statistics that come every day from the New York State Tracker on the New York State Department of Health website, and we process the numbers, and we'll be happy to share them with you. And we'll give you sort of a week perspective of where we are a week from today and a week after that, which will probably show the greater trends. But so it'll be a week until we're back with you. And we'll try to pick some exotic locations where you can get your feet wet or perhaps see a interesting backdrop when we do these. But for our purposes today, again, as always we do, we start with the numbers. As of today, with the information that has been received through the state, we have 527 active cases of coronavirus in Westchester County. Now, that number has oscillated up and down over the last week. Prior to about a week ago, we had a steady decline for 2.5 months in active cases, meaning that the number of people that were tested positive to an aggregate number that's constantly growing, all the people that have tested positive, less the people that were tested positive who've gone 2 weeks without being sick. So the incubation period has come and gone, and they have survived or beaten the virus. When you subtract those two numbers, that's the number of active cases. That number has been decreasing regularly. In the last week, it has gone up and down a little bit. The number we have today, 527, is higher than a couple of the days in the last week, and it's lower than the peak that we've had in the last week. So what we're basically saying is that we're testing more than we've had previously, and we're also getting more positive tests, and we think a fair bit of that is attached to the Chappaqua outbreak, which we'll mention in just a second. But in the aggregate, 35,084 people have tested positive for COVID over the duration of time, beginning March 1st until today on July 6th. That number, however, as a percentage, there is a decreasing number of positives the more we test, and we're getting about a 1%, a little over 1% last night, number of positives. We had 41 positives yesterday to today, and we tested almost 4,000 people, a little under 4,000 people from yesterday to today. So it's about a 1% ratio, but that's a very low ratio compared to where we were in March or April, when we could have as many as 30% of all of the people tested came in positive. So now that the number's down about 1%, our aggregate percentages is dropping, meaning that of the 35,084 people that have tested year to date, only 17% of them, 16%, 15% have tested positive for COVID. 85% of the people tested did not test positive for COVID. There are some repeat numbers in there, but in general, there's a small amount mathematically out of the total. So the fact that there is an uptick in the number of positive cases, and it's reflected in a number of active cases that have slightly gone up and down over the last week. But it is not a straight line direction, and we were also tracking it to a particular incident or two, so it is not geographically widespread around the county. But we're monitoring those things, because if we do get a spike, the spike would show itself to be significantly higher than what we're seeing now, and it would be geographically widespread. We'd be seeing it in every corner of the county, as we did on the front end of the bell curve going up. So there's some things to be concerned about with the numbers, but it is not as concerning as you might see when you're talking about what's happening around the country, where they're getting thousands of cases in Florida and Texas and some of the other states that have been highlighted. We have tested so far 291,583 tests. Now, there's some duplicate tests in there, but they're really not a significant number. Maybe a few hundred tests that represent a second test for a person. So functionally, out of 291,000 tests, that means 29% of Westchester County residents have been tested for COVID, which again is a huge number. I say it every day because every day the number grows, and we're approaching now 30% of our population that would have been tested for COVID, much higher than most other jurisdictions, and that is a good sign that the testing continues. However, it is true, the more you test, the more positives you find, and therefore you've seen that little uptick in positives. Good news is certainly on the hospitalization front. Our hospitalization number is usually a couple of days lag. The last number we had was 61 people hospitalized. I believe that was a Saturday number, this being Monday, and that number has continued to drop. A week ago, that number was in the 70s, and so we're encouraged by that number. And we're also encouraged by the fact there were no fatalities overnight last night. And the total number of people who we have lost due to COVID is 1,427. In the last week, we've lost 3 individuals over the course of the week. I always have to say every individual lost is a tragedy. The family, the people that know the individual grieve greatly. But in terms of numerical impact, 3 people lost over the course of a week is much, much, much better than we saw in the peak period of time when we routinely lost 30, 40, one night of 50 and so forth. Even in nights where we lost 17 or 16 in a night, we now have lost 3 people over the course of a week. So when you look at the uptick in the number of positives, keep in mind that testing positive for COVID is obviously not a good thing. We prefer if nobody tested positive. But the next correlation of seriousness is, what does it do to the hospitalization rate? How many people who have it get sick enough to be in the hospital? So you look to see if the hospitalization rate goes up. And then you also look to see what the fatality circumstances are. So both our fatalities and the hospitalization numbers have been very good within a certain parameter. Now, it's been argued that more young people have recently tested positive for COVID. And so if that is true, then you would assume that the younger, more healthier a person is, they get the disease, but they're able to fight it off without being hospitalized, and we don't lose them in a fatality. So that would be the good side of what we're dealing with if the outbreak is, in fact, heavily targeted to young people. And I'd have to say that I think what we're seeing more and more of is compliance with masks wherever you go. It's not universal. And some folks insist on not wearing it, and people always have an anecdote. I walked down the street, I was at this location, people didn't have a mask, but it's much more now the norm than it ever was, certainly not in the beginning of this. I know myself, we didn't know that we needed to wear a mask in the first few weeks of this until the CDC became more specific about it. And now the governor has given authority for storekeepers and business owners to require mask wearing. So we all routinely wear the masks now when we're not in a setting with immediate members of our family or something of that nature. So we think that's a factor. Social distancing has become more the practice, although it's not universal. It's something we try to identify as much as we can. We think those factors have helped us reduce the amount of the spread, and we are looking to see whether or not that spread, which has increased, will in fact affect hospitalizations and fatalities, which are the 2 most important numbers for us to take a look at. The Chappaqua spike dates back now over 2 weeks ago. It was Saturday, June 20th, that the events, the graduation event and the field night, occurred in Chappaqua. And we have identified at this point that there are 27 positive cases that tie back to that set of activities, the high school graduation and the field night. It is not possible to know if a person contracted it at one event or the other. The graduation was an in-car graduation. There were points in time in which graduates were out of their cars and in close contact with each other. The field night, which was not sponsored by the school district, wasn't sponsored by any community group, was in fact an event with minimal masks and minimal social distancing, big social event, and it did attract students from other schools. So of the 27 positive cases, 21 of them tracked to Chappaqua, 3 of them tracked to Mount Kisco, 2 tracked to Bedford, and 1 tracks to Pleasantville, all within a certain parameter around Chappaqua. There's been no new cases in the last 2 days that are trackable to the Chappaqua spike. So if that is true, we think then it's leveling off. We'll know by the number of people that would naturally come forward and test. But keep in mind, if they caught COVID that night, they would have gone through 2 weeks without having shown symptoms. Now, it's possible that somebody caught it and then was further infected later. So there are some ways by which you're not completely sure that you're in the clear. But the event itself happened over 2 weeks ago now, 16 days ago, so we think that is a good sign. We've also tried to look in some detail whenever we see numbers to try to determine what do they mean. We had a close look at the numbers in the town of Somers. The supervisor there, Rick Morrissey, whom we were with 2 weeks ago at Somers Townhouse, asked us to look in very closely. So both the State Department of Health and the County Department of Health looked at the general numbers for Somers, and we did track into nursing homes that exist in the town, a particular nursing home. We wanted to make sure that the employee test results of the people who work at the nursing home listed their home address, and in some cases they didn't. They listed the nursing home address. Now you may say, well, that's just a matter of numbers. But if a person goes home at night and they go home to a different jurisdiction, the potential of transfer and cluster disease comes from where they live and they interact with people, not just where they work. So I think what we found is that there is a decrease in the Somers number of active cases because we're defining it more carefully, and that's what we're trying to do. This is not a numerical exercise. This is really about trying to make sure we track where the disease is so that we can we sort of limit the amount of spread that comes from it. And as we do these updates once a week, there will be things that happen during the course of the week. We'll no doubt, with our friends in the media, be talking about them in real time as they happen. But at least on a once-a-week basis, we'll try to summarize what's happened so you get a sense of what's the trend, because that's really the question at hand. What's the trend and what does it mean to us as a society, the things that we can or can't do? This is based on the calendar laid out by the governor, the last day of Phase 3, and we're scheduled to enter Phase 4 tomorrow. We're waiting to get the official word from the State Health Department. I assume we'll know before the end of the day. For our friends in the media, if you want to follow up with Catherine Chaffee when we hear this. If there's any reason that we do not move into Phase 4, that'll become apparent as well. We do have a regional call with the other counties within this region, and it is the region that goes into Phase 4 or doesn't as a group. Now, Phase 4 is scheduled for tomorrow, and probably the two most important things in the grouping. There's areas of allowable activity that may not have direct effect to most of us every day. But there has been an approval in Phase 4 of low-risk indoor and outdoor arts and entertainment up to 50 people. Now, we have to make sure we understand what are some of the detailed protocols that the state puts out over and above the general comment on that, so that if we're talking about a community concert or a community performance of a play, as often happens in the summertime, go to a park in almost every one of our local towns, and they'll have a band of some sort appear, and it can be the traditional summer band concert in Scarsdale or Chase Park. It could be sort of the theatrical kind of performances that go on at the gazebo in Armonk, in the town of North Castle. Everyone's got a different variation on this. But up to 50 people, we believe, is the limit that's allowable under Phase 4. Assuming we go into Phase 4 tomorrow, we'll clarify that, and we'll share that information with our colleagues in local government. Of course, that applies to us as well as the county government for what we do. But Phase 4 is scheduled tomorrow. This is the last of the scheduled phases. There is no Phase 5 that's been identified or Phase 6. What the governor has done has banned certain activities across the board. And I think we've been tracking the ones that are still important in general terms. Amusement parks, gyms and health clubs. These are things that are not going to be lifted because we move into another phase. They'll be lifted when the governor lifts his executive orders on that specific action or function. And he might do that at any point in time, or as you've seen in New York City, he has the authority under his executive powers to extend a particular ban, even if it's allowed under a phase. So we are looking to communicate with the state to find out exactly where we go so that we, who are responsible in part to enforce these laws, will be able to do that. And we're trying to, as I've said many times before, enforce with an eye to compliance, not enforcement with an eye to punish. We want people to follow the rules so that they can be healthy, the people around them can be healthy, that we can open our economy, that we can do things that will help us get back to something closer to normal, which we're striking every day. In terms of that normalcy impact, there's a couple of things. We've been talking about the county recreation programs because this is one area where the governor has allowed local governments, including county governments, to run its departments. So last Thursday we were at Wilson Woods Pool in Mount Vernon announcing its opening, which did happen this weekend, along with Tibbetts Brook Pool in Yonkers. There were reduced structures to the way they opened up. They had 2 sessions, a morning session from 11 to 2, an hour break from 2 to 3 for sanitization, and then a 3 to 6 afternoon session. And our 2 beaches are open, have been open now for 5-6 weekends, and now they're open during the middle of the week, or at least Playland is open Tuesday through Sunday. Croton Point is open Thursday through Sunday, those beaches. But we had a total attendance of visitors. We don't know that everyone isn't counted twice if they went twice to a facility. 8,478 visits over the course of the weekend, all pools and all beaches added together. And that represents, people who wanted to cool off in the hot weather that we've had, and there'll be more of that coming during the days ahead. We have indicated that we understand that the city of New York is going to be opening or has opened their beaches and pools, and we're going to revisit then the decision whether or not, particularly for our beaches, not so much for our pools, but to revisit the decision we have made to ban anybody from outside Westchester County to come to our two beaches. Our concern was that neither beach is that large, that we could be easily overswamped by those in New York City who would immediately come and come into place. Now that the New York City beaches and pools are open, they have local options, and then it's much less of a problem. You have a friend coming up from Brooklyn. They're visiting you. You go to the beach. You can go to the beach. Your friend from Brooklyn can't because they don't live here. We don't love that situation. But we did have to protect Westchester residents during the period of time when New York City wasn't open. Now that New York City is open, we'll revisit the policy if we do make an announcement. We'll make a discreet announcement, and it won't need to be a press conference, but we'll share that with you to know if we change the policy there. Also in our Parks Department, we opened up a series of programs for day camps. It was dicey whether we could open them in the same way that pools were dicey. We had to work through a protocol that reduced the number of attendants, and we had a number of features that had to be put into place. I was at Lenoir Preserve this morning for the opening of the Lenoir Preserve day camp, and at that day camp you would see something different than you would have normally seen. The children who are participating in the day camp don't leave the car with the parents. When they come out, there's certain forms that have to be transacted, and they're given a temperature check at the moment that they get out. So if the child is at an appropriate temperature level, that they can come and participate. If they're running a fever, no, they can't participate. That would not normally happen, but that's a means of protection. There's PPE available. Everyone's expected to wear a mask. And we're talking about little kids. Social distancing for little kids is, catch as catch can. So we keep the number of attendees down to reduce the amount of social distancing that are needed and break them into smaller groups. Those camps that opened today included Lenoir Preserve, Muscoot Farms, which is a very popular camp because there are live animals there, Cranberry Lake Preserve right here in North White Plains, Trailside, which is up in Cross River in the town of Lewisboro, the Marshlands Preserve, which is in Rye on the Mamaroneck border, and also hole-in-one golf camps that are going on at all 6 of our golf courses, public golf courses. And so all of that is important. The kids, the staff, the parents are all masked. And we particularly want to thank our Parks Department personnel. We have put them through a lot this year. We have maintained certain things, as you've reported, golf, bicycle Sundays, pools, beaches, now day camps. But we've asked them to do it in a different way, more time-consuming, more work on their part, and they've really risen to the occasion. I want to publicly thank them for doing that, and stay tuned because they have a whole summer full of public effort to continue to go on as these programs continue on. We went through a weekend where we did not have fireworks at Kensico, which would have been on Friday night. We did not have fireworks at Playland on Saturday night. There were plenty of illegal fireworks going off all over Westchester County, as many people would note. The county government, our police responsibility outside of the village of Mount Kisco, where we handle local policing, our police responsibility does not include interacting in the municipalities. Their local police departments handle those complaints. We're there for backup if backup is needed. But we do police the county parks, and so we wanted to make sure there were no fireworks, illegal fireworks going off at a county park because some folks wanted to celebrate the 4th on their own. And if you recall, when we had our press conference last Thursday, we had Captain Jim Luciano of our police department talk about the safety factors of doing illegal fireworks and the dangers that are there, and many anecdotes about people that had some tragic situations. I think I saw a video on the news where a house somewhere in the Hudson Valley caught fire because of illegal fireworks and the lack of knowledge of exactly how to handle them, and blew up a house, which is not a good way to celebrate the 4th of July. But suffice to say, we're trying very hard to have the right amount of recreation as a relief for people. We've also announced previously that we have drive-in movies scheduled for Kensico Dam Plaza and also for Playland. We understand that our next one for Kensico Dam Plaza has sold out. But if you're interested, go to Westchester County Parks, WC Parks. There's a ticket connection there on drive-in. You'll find out the details you want. No need to repeat it. The 2 movies that we planned for Kensico are targeted to kids, and we think that will be a lot of fun for them. And we're just trying to do the best we can. We've also mentioned that aside from our pools and other activities, our miniature golf courses are open. We have them in Playland, right next to the boardwalk, Saxon Woods Park next to the pool, and at Tibbetts Brook Park, also proximate to the pool. They open different hours, 10 to 6 at Playland, 12 to 8 at Saxon Woods, 12 to 7 at Tibbetts Brook. As I mentioned, too, in the state of candor, those miniature golf courses need some additional capital improvements. So somebody goes there and says, this doesn't look great. No, it doesn't look great. During this COVID year where we're worried about our finances, you saw that press conference last week, our capital investment needed to make the mini golf places look better, perform better, are yet ahead of us. But they are open, they are workable, they're usable, and they represent another different recreational activity that we wanted to point out. So in terms of all our parks issues, that is part of what we're dealing with. As we go forward this week, we're going to try to interact with the state, try to understand now, if we go into phase 4, what the expectation levels will be on some of these individual issues that we've talked about for which state decisions are necessary. We've gotten many calls from small yoga studios, from different health clubs that aren't large health clubs, that they run a dance class of 10 or 12 people, and what's allowable and what isn't within that context, outside and inside. We have innumerable number of individuals who have parents or loved ones in nursing homes or assisted living facilities that have been unable to see them in person, touch them in person, since March. And that's a long period of time to go. Certainly those folks who are up there in years, and some of them may have some issues of dementia or Alzheimer's. There's really a desperate need for that human contact. I think we've expressed that to the state to see if there's any protocols that can be created to allow that to be done safely, so that people can have that opportunity to interact with their loved ones. Certainly it's a compassionate thing to do, but everything falls below the standard of whether or not we can do it safely, and to try to do that in an intelligent fashion. And we interact with the state on a regular basis on these things. We still have a weekly call now with our municipal officials. That comes later this afternoon at 3:30. We'll be talking with them, sharing some information on a host of different issues, some of the things we've talked about here, some of the enforcement issues, to try to stay in touch with them. And similarly to this update, we'll do this once a week as well. So Monday will be our day for communications, and if any other issues come out from our municipals, we'll try to deal with it from there. At that point, I'm going to stop the presentation, take any questions from the press. We have with us Samantha Crawford again from News 12. She's been very loyal, or despite, maybe she's coming no matter whether she wants to come or not, or producer's telling her to come, but you're here, Samantha. Any questions you have?
Yes, please. Going back to the Chappaqua incident, has the county's contact tracers had success in getting in touch with all the students that were at this party, as well as making sure that they and their family members, remain in quarantine?
Nothing is perfect, but we've gotten substantial compliance, and so that makes us feel good. Substantial compliance, 85% of the people responding. And it is difficult because the level of contact tracing that we have to do will seem intrusive to people when they probe about who you've been with, who do you know, and what kind of a context, and so forth. But we've had substantial compliance. I think what's also happened too is that the town of Newcastle has passed a law that imposed some strict fines, which they are going to register within their community, and I think people understand now that there's a potential price to pay if there's no cooperation. You've seen over in Rockland County that they actually want to get subpoenas for individuals that were recalcitrant. So I think we're trying to do this the nice way. I think we've had a good response on this particular outbreak, but outbreaks will happen for any number of different reasons, and we're going to see over the 4th of July weekend, we can't be sure that every backyard party was properly masked and properly social distanced. We wouldn't know that, and we wouldn't have sent county police in to verify that. So we're going to see what happens over the next couple of weeks, and we may see some additional spikes. And it's going to be a battle all summer long, because just, humans as we are, on vacation, a vacation mindset, hot weather, there's any number of reasons why we might cluster and potentially spread the virus. So we'll monitor it. We did have good success, we think, so far on contact tracing within the Chappaqua issue.
And two more questions. Do we have an estimate to how many students might have been at this party, as well as the 27 cases? Are those solely students, or those some family members?
We don't have hard numbers for the field night event. We obviously know how many students graduated in the range of 200 or slightly above or below that number. There were family members that were there for the graduation. The field night, I'd say at least that much, if not more. I mentally envision, an event of 250, 300 young people. but I don't have a hard number. I don't know that there was a count taken, but I think that's sort of a fair number. And the number is one thing, but the lack of social distancing is really the problem. You could create a big problem with 40 people that aren't social distancing and not wearing masks, but it was a significant group of people.
And the 27 cases, those primarily the students or these family members?
There's some family members in that number, but I think the majority of them are young people. Out of those that we have. If there's some questions about further breakdown, I'll ask Catherine Chaffee to be available for you or any of our other friends in the media to probe a little further. HIPAA does not allow us to be too specific, but we can give out numbers and municipalities so we can come to that judgment. I don't know that we can give out actual ages. We can draw general, cohort guesstimates on that. So.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. Catherine, you have some questions remote.
Yes, I have 3 questions from the Journal News. So in regards to the law that would fine people who don't wear masks, is that something that the county would look at?
Well, I think we're looking at what kind of response do we get from people using the efforts of enforcement that we have now. I would tell you that I've spoken consistently every weekend to our Parks Department officials and our Public Safety Department officials. And they have said that most people are complying with the law. And when they are pointed out that they need to wear masks, they need to socially distance, in the larger degree, they've been cooperative. Part of the problem is you can't have people in every corner of every park all weekend long. We just don't have the manpower to do that, either through Parks Department or police safety. So we do require, sort of the self-policing effort of individuals, and most people are following that. So the law itself, to pass that may be necessary, may not be necessary. We believe we have some intrinsic power to write tickets as it is to enforce the the state executive laws. Whether we seek to go and formally create a separate level of crime and payment, a penalty fee is not necessary in our mind. But that doesn't mean that we wouldn't do it if we thought things got out of control. We're trying again to judge it in a way, particularly in this climate where there's much question about, policing and role. We don't want to create extra conflict. We don't want to put our police in an extra position of undue conflict. They're writing a ticket out to an aggrieved group of people and then things start to happen. So I don't think we plan to ask for any additional authority. I think we feel we have some authority if we need to use it. And right now I prefer that we use it with very great discretion.
Right. The next question is, how under control, and you've addressed this in part, how under control do you think the Chappaqua outbreak is?
What I understand it to be from the people who've done the contact tracing is that we think it's flattened out. We do not think there is a much greater spike that's ahead of us. In other words, we don't expect that a week from today we'll have 58 cases. Now, we'll find out. Anybody who tries to guess the course of this contagion is guessing. But from what we've been told, and we rely on the health department and the contact tracers that have been reporting back, we appear to have at least a reasonable amount of confidence that we have identified most of what the contagion spread. If it's 29 today and it turns out to be 34 a week from today, that would not surprise me. It would surprise me if it turned out to be 58 or higher than that next week. But what has been reported to me is that we seem to be in a pretty good place for having understood and dealt with it. And the fact now that the contagion is 16 days old gives us some comfort as well. So people who are asymptomatic that have now cleared it would no longer be in a position of jeopardy.
Okay. And the last question is, are there any aspects of Phase 4 that you would urge residents to use with caution or to avoid altogether?
Well, I think you have to look at the permissibility of indoor and outdoor arts and entertainment events and how they're socially spaced. During a normal summertime, I've personally been, in all these different communities for different kinds of outdoor events. And it's wonderful. It's the sun is setting and there's music and there's, party atmosphere. Some places people get up and dance, and there's certainly concessions for food and for drink, and people who live in the same community know each other, they see each other, they greet each other warmly. There's a social connective in all of this. I think people, as they do with everything now, have to be mindful of that level of social connectedness. And you go through rituals, longtime friends you extend an elbow to. I mean, that's not what you normally would do, but that's what you have to do in this kind of situation. So I would say that's a consideration. I have seen, as I have gone out during Phase 3 situations, like indoor dining, I've talked to people and said, hey, you want to get together for a cup of coffee? And you'll hear sort of a reticence. Well, yeah, if they have outdoor dining, because they feel safer being outdoors, even though indoors is now permissible, at a lower level of attendance. neighborhoods. So I think people now in the marketplace are making their decisions as to what makes sense or not. To me, that particular the opening of arts and entertainment, leisure activities up to 50 people is probably the one where people will take a close look at before they go ahead. It may be legal, it may actually be happening, but whether they attend or not will be a judgment call that they make. Having a film crew, photograph a commercial on the street that you live on, and there's some money for the municipality, I tend to think that's not going to be a big problem. The average citizen would not interact with that group of people. It's now permissible, but it's not a personal connection. And we're not really sure what the loosening of prohibitions on higher education represent. There are probably some examples of that. I do know that today use of sports fields have been made available. It's not part of Phase 4. That was a general lifting of a ban that went into effect today. And so I assume that means we'll be seeing some softball games and, maybe some other kinds of activities outdoors. We'll have to see how they look. And, if you see a volleyball game and that's considered low impact, I'm not sure if it is or isn't. It's a very tough definition of what's low impact sports and what high impact sports is. But if you see a particular kind of event and people seem to be up close and personal, then the answer to the question is, if you feel doubtful about it, don't do it. That's the safest way to approach it. So if there are no other questions, we'll go now a week until we do one of these updates. We will try to share detailed information with folks about some of these different situations that we're dealing with. And obviously, any of our friends in the media, if you have any questions about any issue at any time, please give us a call, and we'll be happy to go over with it. So with that, I'm George Latimer, County Executive. Thank you for watching. We appreciate those who've been tuning in now for what amounts to 4 months of these updates. We hope that we're going to get back to something that looks more like normalcy. We will have press conferences on other topics coming up that are very important. And while we don't put the COVID is not behind us, we want to try to put the issues of the COVID infection into a context where there are other public policy issues that we need to address as well. And we have to restart the engine on affordable housing. We have to restart the engine on an airport master plan. We have to restart the engine on eviction protection proceedings. We have to look at election for November of 2020 and determine if there's things that we can do to help make the electoral process go more smoothly on election day than it did on primary day. So there are other issues at hand, too. We want to try to give them some proper attention as well. With that, thank you very much. Have a safe day.